Just let your experience be as it is from moment to moment without any impulse to control or manipulate it in any way. Thoughts, images, feelings, sensations of the body, the sound of my voice, the sight of this room, the temperature of the air on your skin. The sound of the plane overhead. It's a trend. Be sure to include the full spectrum of your experience. Just allow your attention to range freely over your entire experience. And just pause for a moment with anything that you encounter. Let's take, for instance, the current thought. And just say to yourself, I am aware of this thought. Doesn't matter what the thought is about. Allow yourself to think of anything you like. You notice a thought. I am aware of this thought. Allow your attention to go to the tingling sensation of the soles of your feet. And say to yourself, I am aware of this sensation. Whatever feelings or emotions may be present, don't be particularly interested in the content of your feelings. Just say to yourself, I am aware of this feeling. Your eyes are open, say to yourself, I am aware of the sight of this room. Just in this way, alight briefly on every object of experience, like a butterfly alighting on a series of flowers in a garden. And with each object, just say to yourself, I am aware of this object, whatever it is. Notice in this way that being aware accompanies all experience. I am aware of my thoughts. I am aware of my feelings. I am aware of sensations. I am aware of perceptions. I am aware. I am aware. I am aware accompanies all experience, irrespective of its content. If I am depressed, I am aware of it. I am agitated, I am aware of it. itself, I am aware of it. Now, be more interested in the experience of being aware than whatever it is you are aware of. Normally we are so fascinated by the objective content of our experience. That is, our thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, perceptions, that we overlook or ignore the simple experience of being aware. The experience of being aware is not something that is unfamiliar to us or unknown. On the contrary, the experience of being aware is what we call I. I am aware of my thoughts. I am aware of feelings. I am aware of sensations. In other words, I is the common name that we give to simply being aware of awareness itself. And we cannot say that I am unknown or not familiar. There is nothing more familiar to ourself than ourself. The experience of being aware is even more intimate to us than our most intimate thoughts or feelings. The experience of being aware or awareness itself is not hidden or buried or hard to find. It is not something that some special people have privileged access to. The experience of being aware shines brightly in all experience. It shines equally brightly in a deep depression as it does in a moment of ecstasy. In other words, the experience of being aware or awareness itself is not hidden, although it seems to be missing. It seems to be missing or hidden only because of the exclusive focus of our attention on the objective content of experience. Just as one who is lost in the drama of a movie may fail to notice the screen. The screen is not really hidden, but it seems to be missing due to our exclusive involvement in the drama. It is for this reason that in the tantric tradition of Kashmir Shaivism, they say that that for which all people long is more hidden than the most concealed, and yet more evident than the most evident of things. Just as, relatively speaking, the sun's light illuminates all objects, so the light of awareness, experience of being aware, illuminates all, renders knowable all experience. In other words, all experience is shining brightly with the light of awareness, with the light of pure knowing. It is not necessary to move away from any particular experience. It is not necessary to control or still our thoughts or transform our negative emotions into positive emotions. Every thought, every emotion, irrespective of its content, shines brightly with the awareness that illuminates it. All objective experience shines brightly with the knowing of it. That which illuminates or renders knowable all objective experience can never itself be found as an experience. It never shows up as a thought, a feeling, a sensation, or a perception. So do not look for the experience of being aware or awareness itself in your objective experience. The screen never shows up as an object in the movie, although all there is to the movie is the screen. Awareness never shows up as an object of experience, although all there is to experience is the awareness or the knowing of it. It is for this reason that the Sufi mystic Bistami said that for which all people long cannot be found by seeking, and yet only seekers find it. If I were to ask you now, stand up and take a step towards yourself, what would you do? Where would you go? We cannot take a step towards ourselves because we are already standing as ourselves. Nor indeed can we take a step away from ourselves because we take ourselves with us wherever we go. Likewise, awareness cannot take a step towards itself. It cannot direct its attention towards itself because it is already standing at or as itself. In other words, awareness is too close to itself to be known in subject-object relationship. All other knowledge and experience, all other knowledge and experience are known in subject-object relationship, except awareness's knowledge of itself. Thus, awareness's knowledge of itself, the knowing of our own being, is a completely different category of knowledge. It's the only knowledge that is not relative to the finite mind. It is thus said to be absolute knowledge, the only knowledge that remains the same at all times, for all people, under all circumstances and in all conditions. It is thus said to be absolute knowledge, or in religious language, God, God's infinite being. In other words, awareness's knowledge of itself shines in each of our minds as the knowledge I am aware, or simply I am. God's knowledge of himself shines in each of our hearts as the simple feeling of being. Because there is no distance from awareness to awareness, there is no room for a path, a practitioner, or an effort. It is not possible to make an effort to know our own being. We could only make an effort to know something other than our own being. In other words, the knowing of our own being, being aware of being aware, is utterly effortless. It is for this reason that Ashtavakra said, for the sage even blinking is too much trouble. Being aware of being aware the recognition of our own essential, irreducible being, requires less effort, less practice than blinking. Being aware of being aware is the highest form of meditation, prayer, or yoga. It is the meditation, prayer, or yoga for which all other meditations, prayers, and yogas are either a preparation or an expression. That was not meant in any way to put down any other form of meditation, prayer, or yoga. It was simply to put the entire spiritual journey in context. All that is required is to cease being exclusively fascinated by the content of experience and to instead be aware of being aware. To cease ignoring the presence of awareness, that is, to cease ignoring or forgetting ourself in favor of objective experience. This ignoring of ourself, or overlooking of the presence of awareness, forgetting of ourself, is referred to as ignorance in the Vedantic tradition. And ignorance in this context doesn't mean stupidity, as it does in common parlance. It simply means the ignoring of the presence of awareness, ignoring of ourself. In the Christian tradition, it is referred to as the fall or original sin. Missing the mark, or missing the most essential element, missing or overlooking the most essential element of experience, the simple experience of being aware. With this ignoring or overlooking of ourself, so we ignore or overlook the innate peace and fulfillment that reside there. feeling that this peace and fulfillment are missing, most people embark on a great search in the world for an object, substance, activity, or relationship which will bring about this peace or happiness. When these fail us sufficiently often, we then turn to the religious or spiritual traditions and seek again an exotic or spiritual state of mind, a marvelous state of bliss, some refined, esoteric or subtle objective experience with the same purpose of simply finding peace or happiness there. But sooner or later, even these exotic or unusual states of mind turn out to be temporary, and therefore cannot be a source of the lasting peace and happiness for which we long. At some point, when even the most refined experiences have failed us sufficiently often, there is this either spontaneous turning around, or this turning around as a result of reading a book or meeting a friend. Turning around of the mind towards its essence or source. And this turning around is the beginning of the return journey. The return of the mind to its home in the heart of awareness. The placeless place in which the peace and happiness for which we have longed all our lives reside. So in this approach, which is sometimes called the direct path, we go directly to the source of all peace and fulfillment, our essential self-aware being, awareness itself. We don't go via any kind of objective experience, however refined that experience might be, such as a mantra, a flame, the breath, the pause between breaths, a guru, a teacher. We go directly, that is, the mind goes directly to its essence. And the essence of the mind, pure awareness or pure consciousness, is not hard to find. The mind is shining. All knowledge and experience are shining with the knowing of them. And a mind that is accustomed to returning frequently to its source or its home in the heart of awareness becomes progressively saturated with the peace and fulfillment that reside there. And when such a mind returns to the world, in other words, when such a mind turns outward again towards objects, activities, relationships, it brings the peace and happiness in which it has immersed itself in its source out into the world to be communicated, celebrated, and shared. Is there anything you'd like to discuss? mic's not working.
Yeah, we don't have the technical guys. If you can just
Okay, you have to
in one
speak up.
moment. Yeah, I'll be as loud as I can. Thank you. Sorry. Talk before about the feeling of love, and the feeling of love being the same for whoever or whatever it's for.
Okay, well, why don't I repeat your question so everyone can hear it? So I think you're referring to yesterday when I spoke of... Oh, it's working again. Okay. Thank you.
The feeling of love, so be it for anyone, the essence, the feeling of love is the same.
Yes.
But yet relationships feel very different, have different attachments. I don't know if you could talk a bit more about that, and also about what makes a healthy relationship. Is that part of when you actually realise that you don't need or want anything from anyone else, that you actually have all that, but then you can get everything from another relationship?
Yes. Yes. Most of us enter into a relationship, particularly intimate relationships, but in fact all relationships, with a desire to receive something from the other. And the reason we want to receive something from the other is to make us happy. So the best possible way to enter a relationship is to understand and feel that the happiness for which we seek in relationship can only be found in the depths of our own being. And that understanding relieves the relationship of a tremendous burden, in fact an impossible burden, the burden of producing happiness for a separate self. No relationship, however fine, can be a source of happiness. It can be an expression of happiness, a sharing of love, but never a source of love. And if we enter into a relationship with someone with this subtle, implicit demand that they make us happy, then that is a recipe for conflict in a relationship. And if we look at the conflicts in our relationships, they nearly always arise because the other is failing in one way or another to behave in such a way as to make us happy. So, if we first discover the source of peace and fulfillment within ourselves, and then seek to share that in a relationship, then that will give the relationship the best possible chance of being a truly loving and therefore a truly intimate relationship. And just referring to your first comment, it's true that all relationships, objectively, all relationships are different. The relationship we have with our intimate partner, our parent, our child, our neighbour, our dog or our cat, a stranger in the street, etc. Each of these relationships has a particular flavour. It has a different objective quality to it. But in each case, the love that we feel is the same love. There's only one kind of love. There are different flavours of its expression. But the experience of love is always the same. When you were a 5-year-old girl and you felt that you loved your parents, your friend, whoever it was, that experience of love is exactly the same experience of love that you now feel for your friends. Remember Shakespeare, love is not love which alters when it alteration finds or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is and ever fixes mark. It is always steady. It is always the same. Love is always the same experience. And what is that experience? It is the absence of separation between ourself and the other. In other words, it is the recognition of our shared being. When you love or are in love, do you not feel, at least to an extent, that everything that separates you from the other dissolves and therefore brings you close? And ultimately, when we are deeply in love, we say, I feel one with you. That is an experience of our shared being. It's for this reason that Rumi said, true lovers never really meet. They are in each other all along. In other words, love is not a relationship or a meeting between two people. Love is the absence of relationship. It is the collapse of relationship. It is the collapse of two people, two selves. A relationship always requires two, a subject and an object. The experience of love is the absence of that distinction, the collapse of duality, and the revelation, the subsequent revelation of our shared being. That is the experience of love. And it is for this reason that all people love love above all else. Is there anyone here that desires anything more than love? You see, love is, all people desire love above all else, which means what people want, what separate selves want, is ultimately to be divested of their separateness. They don't really want a relationship or an object or an exotic state of mind or a substance. The reason people seek these objects is only to be divested of their sense of separation, the wound of separation. All the separate self ever seeks is to be divested of its separateness. And when the separateness of the separate self dissolves, the true and only self of pure consciousness shines. That shining is the experience of love. It is that for which all people long.
Hi, Rupert.
Hi.
Yesterday and today you talked about the direct path. In other traditions, for instance, the yoga, there are some advanced techniques. For instance, in Kriya Yoga, there are some pranayama-based techniques that provoke changes in the body-mind. So, for instance, they talk about prana entering the Sushumna and opening the various chakras. So I cannot really reconcile two approaches which seem quite different to me.
In the traditional approaches that you are referring to, these techniques and practices are considered necessary prerequisites for the recognition of our true nature. They are purification practices in which the mind becomes more and more and more refined. Its grasp on objective experience becomes finer and finer until at some point it dissolves in its source. In this approach, the mind doesn't go through a series of objective practices focusing on the breath or prana or a posture or a mantra or a flame or even the pause between breaths. The mind goes directly to its essence, the presence of awareness. And there is then and abides there, rests there. And as it rests, as the mind sinks deeper and deeper into its essence, it is sometimes suddenly, usually gradually, divested of its limitations, and at some point stands revealed as pure consciousness. Now, for a person on the direct path, there is then a process that it is necessary to engage after the recognition of our true nature, in which the mind and the body are progressively realigned with this new understanding. So in the direct path, the practices that you're referring to take place after the recognition of our true nature and are considered to be the means by which all realms of our experience are realigned with our new understanding. Whereas in the traditional progressive approach, these practices are considered to be prerequisites to the recognition of our true nature.
Very clear, thank you.
Do you think there is a place for psychology and that journey of understanding ourselves from a psychological therapeutic point of view to reaching our true nature? Do you think we need to understand ourselves from that, like almost a strengthening of the ego to then overcome the ego, or?
Okay. In theory, no, but in practice, maybe. So what do I mean by this? In theory, no, because all minds, however dark, clouded, distorted, unhappy they may be, are shining with awareness. So theoretically, any mind has the possibility of turning around from whatever it is, the deepest depression, and going directly to its essence or source. However, in practice, which is much more important, some minds are so deeply entangled with thoughts, images, memories, feelings, relationships, that turning around, whilst possible theoretically, is for all practical purposes impossible. And for such a person, some preparatory exploration that may take the form of work with a therapist, or may take the form of another practice that were referred to in the previous conversation, may be necessary. I discovered this very early on, shortly after I started speaking about these matters, seven or so years ago. I lived in Shropshire in the West Midlands then, and I ran a small meditation group once a week. Ellen and I ran a small group together in our home, and 11 or 12 people used to show up once a week. And there was a man locally who was, he was a very nice person, very intelligent, but he was unstable mentally. He had had a lot of mental issues. And he had recently come across Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and he was totally lit up by it. And he knew that I was interested in such matters, so he asked me one day, can I come to one of your meetings? Now my initial response was, no, don't come. But I overrode that response, thinking this direct path is available to everyone, the presence of awareness shines in all minds, and therefore it's suitable for everyone. So I said, yes, fine, come. So I started a meeting with a introductory meditation similar to this morning, and then asked for any questions. And he started asking questions, and just a torrent of thoughts came out. And I realized after a while that he couldn't cope with what he was hearing. It was not leading him to his true nature. It was simply destabilizing his sense of himself, but leaving him not in clarity, in peace. It was leaving him in fear, despair, nihilism, agitation. And I learned a month later that he had been readmitted to a mental institution. And I realized then that it was naive of me to have said yes to him. A more mature response would have been no. Keep going with your therapy, keep reading The Power of Eckhart Tolle, come back in a couple of months. So yes, there are some cases, not very many, I have to say, but there are some cases where the mind is so confused, so involved, so mixed up with thoughts and feelings, that this approach is too radical and too direct. And then seeing a therapist, particularly a therapist that has this understanding as their background, would be a very good preparation.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'm a therapist as well, a yoga teacher, so I find that balance sometimes very difficult.
Yes, yes. But you well know from your practice, if someone comes to you suffering terribly from in an abusive relationship, you don't say to them, ask yourself, who is it that knows or is aware of your experience? That would not be the appropriate response. 5 or 6 weeks later, having seen them regularly, having walked slowly with them, you may intuit the moment when it is appropriate to introduce this presence of awareness in the background of their experience. And if you do it skillfully and sensitively at the right moment, yes, they will recognize it. And then you open a door and you can go more deeply into this approach.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
I caught the end of. I was very moved this morning, and felt very connected by everything that's happening so far. But I was really moved by the end of something that happened at the end of yesterday's session, when you asked a question in response to somebody else about would your preference be to choose enduring contentment. I'm paraphrasing, this is what I heard. Enduring contentment, or would you choose moments of heightened bliss, heightened ecstasy? And it's such a powerful question for me, this, because I think I want enduring contentment. but I find myself choosing paths that I think that feel like they suck me into bliss. Which, you know, nothing wrong with bliss. Except if the bliss is preventing some sort of enduring contentment. And what I perceive happens to me in the world is that I have this huge enthusiasm, and does some sort of long-term enduring contentment mean I have to yield that level of enthusiasm and commitment?
Oh no, not at all.
Oh,
Not at all. Not at all. But when we are enthusiastic about doing something, we are expressing our love for that thing or that activity. In other words, our enthusiasm, in fact, enthusiasm comes from the Greek word meaning in God. It is an expression of that love or that happiness. So when we are engaged in something enthusiastically, we are not trying to derive happiness from the experience. We are trying to express happiness in the experience. So in fact, your level of enthusiasm will increase to the extent that you are in touch with the peace and happiness of your true nature.
that makes sense.
So let me ask you a question about these moments of, not about the moments of bliss, which, as you say, nothing wrong with moments of bliss. What is your state in between two moments of bliss?
Well, that's not constant either.
What is the common factor in your state between periods of bliss? How could you characterize those times?
Well, there are three places, essentially, for me. One is bliss, one is despair, and one is bliss, one is despair, and I do know what enduring contentment might feel like. I do really understand that. It's just that I don't experience it as enduring.
What I was interested in was the despair.
Mm.
If you are experiencing moments or periods of bliss, or states of bliss, like all states, they come and go. And in between those states of bliss, you are going to be experiencing states that are, let's just say, less than blissful. May not be as strong as despair, but they are less than blissful. It's called suffering, unhappiness. And if we are unhappy or suffering, we are longing. We are longing for happiness. So if you are seeking periods of bliss, you have to understand that you are going to experience bliss, then suffering, then bliss, then suffering, then bliss, then suffering. That's the best you're going to get. If you want that, that's fine, go for it. But if you come to the understanding that more than moments or periods of bliss in your life, you want stable peace, fulfillment. If you want this to be your baseline, the place from which you think, feel, act, perceive and relate on a daily basis, then you have to see that these states of bliss are simply that. They are states. They come and go. They can never fulfill you. So this understanding that you've come to is going to, it has already, I can see by your question, precipitated a crisis in you. What do you want? States of bliss alternating with more or less intense periods of suffering, or do you want lasting peace? And if you choose lasting peace, have the courage and the clarity to see that the only place to look for lasting peace is in that which lasts. To look for lasting peace in an intermittent object, activity, relationship, or state is madness. The madness from which most people suffer. If you want lasting peace, look for it in that which lasts. And then,
Hello. Rupert, I attended one of your workshops a few months ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but you answered a question then about so how consciousness sort of is in the body but is not the body. Sort of that was sort of the essence of the questions. And from my memory, you were saying you have to sort of think about it as an ocean and a current, and you know, sort of the consciousness comes together in the current in the body, and then as you die, the consciousness doesn't disappear but stays in the ocean, but sort of dissolves in the rest of the ocean to then come together again in a current. Now, if that sort of assumes past lives and sort of, you know, sort of an eternity of that, where consciousness attaches itself, does it matter? Sort of, you know, does it matter sort of in which way this current comes together, you know, in that body? You know, sort of coming from different pieces, maybe from past lives, or sort of, you know, can you connect to that, or, you know, is that current sort of, I know it's just a metaphor, but would that current be part of the body, or is that also a little bit part of the consciousness?
I'm not sure that I've understood your question, but let me respond and tell me if I haven't understood it. Close your eyes for me. In fact, we could all close our eyes. Now, imagine that you are a newborn infant. And the only reason for doing this is because newborn infants have no memory to refer to, and they cannot conceptualize their experience. In other words, all a newborn infant can do is know their current experience. They have no idea what their current experience is. There is just indescribable or unnameable experience. Now, allow the experience of your body to come to your attention, but immediately drop the label body. You, the newborn infant, have no idea that this tingling, vibrating sensation is something called a body. It is just a sensation, a vibration. So you are a newborn infant, you are a field of pure sensitivity, and you are simply experiencing this tingling vibration that later on you will conceptualize as the body, but you are experiencing it without having any idea what it is. Now, with your eyes still shut, see if you can find a clearly defined edge to this sensation. Does this sensation have an age without reference to thought or memory? How old is the current sensation? Does the sensation have a particular shape or a particular size? Does it have a gender or a nationality? So see in this way that if we stay close to our experience of the body, it is the way we actually experience, not the way we conceptualize the body, but the way we actually experience it is a sensation or a vibration or a network of sensations without any particular shape, form, size, age, gender. And ask yourself the question, is this sensation appearing in awareness or outside awareness? So keep your eyes shut, but take up the mic so you can answer these questions. Is this amorphous tingling vibration appearing in awareness or outside awareness?
I think it's outside. It's sort of awareness observes it.
Sorry?
I feel as if awareness observes it.
I didn't hear that.
As if awareness is observing it.
Awareness is observing it, but awareness is more than just observing it. Awareness is the field in which the sensation is appearing. Is it not? A sensation is an appearance, and all appearances appear in something or on something. In what is your current sensation appearing? Don't think about this, go to your experience. The sensation you are experiencing is appearing in some kind of field. What is it appearing in your experience? Is it appearing in consciousness or outside consciousness?
Well, I guess it has to be consciousness.
No,
but I can't see it.
I
can't see it. I can't
Okay,
tell you.
all right. So you don't think your sensation is appearing in consciousness. So where is it appearing?
Yeah, no, you're right. It has to be because...
No, but again, I don't like it has to be. Because that tells me that you're reasoning this out and that you've come to an intellectual conclusion. I want your experience. Is it appearing in consciousness or is it not? In your experience.
See, I'm not sure if it is the mind or the consciousness.
But for this conversation, the mind and consciousness are the same.
Okay.
Consider them the same. I could ask you the same. Okay, let me ask you the same question in a different way. Is this sensation appearing in the mind or outside the mind?
In the mind.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. Mind is the activity of consciousness. It is a limitation of consciousness, but all there is to mind is consciousness. So for this conversation, mind and consciousness are the same. So mind is a field in which all your experience appears, including the experience of your body, which is the current sensation. Yeah?
Yeah.
What about the perception of this room? Would you agree, first of all, that your only knowledge or experience of this room is the current perception?
Yes.
Or a series of perceptions?
Yeah.
And do not all perceptions appear in your mind?
Yeah.
So is it your experience that your mind appears in the body, in the world, or is it your experience that the body and the mind, the body and the world appear in your mind?
They appear in my mind.
Is there any experience that you have ever had or could ever have that appears anywhere else other than in your mind?
No.
So if we stay very close to the evidence of experience, we don't experience a mind in a body. We experience a body as a flow of sensations and perceptions in the mind. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, would you agree that everything that appears in the mind is made of the mind?
Yes.
What else is there in the mind out of which any appearance could be made? Nothing.
No.
So it is, and we're talking experience here. Yeah? We're not talking philosophy. We're not talking about some abstract experience. We're talking about our very real, ordinary, intimate experience of the body, which we experience as a flow of sensations and perceptions in the mind. And all there is to the mind, when I say all there is, I mean the stuff that the mind is made of, is consciousness. Is that clear to you?
Yeah.
Therefore, it is your experience, not just a theory, but it is your experience that your body, your only experience of your body, is made out of consciousness. In fact, all your experience is made out of, appears in, is known by, and is made of consciousness. Can you point to anything in your current experience, or in your remembered experience, or indeed in your imagined experience, that is not appearing in consciousness or mind?
So also going back to the newborn feels his or her limbs going around by its consciousness.
Yes, but all the newborn knows of its limbs, that the newborn has no knowledge of having arms or legs. All the newborn knows is a flow of sensations. It will later conceptualize those sensations as arms and legs or my body. But its actual experience is a flow of perceptions in consciousness. And that is our experience now. In other words, from the conventional point of view, first of all, there is stuff called matter, out of which the world is made. The mind develops, that the body is born in the world, the mind develops in the body, and the essence of the mind is this fragile, fleeting thing called consciousness. That's the conventional point of view upon which our world culture is founded. But if we take the point of view of experience, if we agree that experience alone must be the test of reality, and we refer only to the evidence of our experience, we see that consciousness was here first. The activity of consciousness is what we call mind, and all experience appears in the mind. In other words, all experience is an activity of consciousness. The reason that physicists have never found this stuff called matter existing outside consciousness is because it's not there. They'll never find it. All anybody could ever find is the activity of their own mind. And all there is to mind is consciousness. Now, to go on to the second part of your question. When any particular activity of the mind disappears, the consciousness that is the essence of that mind doesn't disappear with it. So let's take thinking, for instance. Is it obvious to you that thinking is an activity of the mind, and that all there is to mind is consciousness? Now, when your current thought disappears, an activity of mind disappears. But the consciousness out of which that activity is made remains over and assumes the form of the next activity, the next thought or perception, whatever. Yeah? Are you with me? Yeah. So the body, which we know as a series of sensations and perceptions is an activity of the mind. When that activity comes to an end, the consciousness, which is the essence or reality of the mind, doesn't come to an end with it. So the metaphor that I sometimes use for this, which I borrowed from a friend of mine called Bernardo Castrop, is the metaphor, and this is what you were referring to earlier, the metaphor of the whirlpool in the river. So a whirlpool is not an object in its own right. We cannot take a whirlpool out of the river. There's no such thing as a whirlpool independent of the river. In fact, the whirlpool is not an object, it is the activity of the river, an activity of the water. And that activity gives the whirlpool a particular form, a name and a form. So the activity of this whirlpool is like the activity of our mind, which gives consciousness our mind's localized consciousness, just like the whirlpool is a localization of the river. So when the whirlpool begins to disband, the residues of the whirlpool flow out into the river, and the whirlpool loses its name and its form. But the energies that were contained in the whirlpool ripple out into the river, and there's nothing to suggest that they won't gather together again downstream to form the basis of a new whirlpool. So in exactly the same way, our bodies are a network of sensing and perceiving. In our actual experience, they are activities. The body is an activity that appears in our mind. And when that activity disperses into the broader medium of consciousness, the river, there's nothing to suggest that those energies don't remain in some form and could not gather together later downstream to form the basis of a new whirlpool. So this is just a model of reincarnation that is in line with this understanding. The model of reincarnation is not important. What is much more important is to experience the body as a flow of sensations, floating weightlessly in the open empty space of awareness, like an amorphous cloud floating in the sky.
But then, this consciousness is there sort of eternally, and it is not part of this world, but this is this river.
Can you say that a bit
So
louder?
if then consciousness is not the whirlpool, it's sort of part of the
consciousness is the whirlpool, or rather the whirlpool is the activity of the river. So all your experience, that means your body, the sound of my voice, the sound of the plane, the sight of this room, all your experience is the activity of your mind. And all there is to your mind is infinite consciousness. That's not theory, that is your experience. That is what each of us are experiencing now. What is theory is I consciousness am located in this body just behind my eyes, and this is all an outside world made out of matter. We have become so accustomed to this theory that most of us, probably not everyone here, but most people take this as the norm. This is indeed the paradigm upon which our world culture is founded, but it's abstract. It's not in line with our experience. If we're like true scientists, and we rely only strictly on the evidence of experience, we have to admit all experience appears as the activity of our own minds, and all there is to mind is unlimited consciousness.
And if you say unlimited consciousness is all our consciousness is one,
can you find a limit or an edge to the field of consciousness in which your experience appears?
No.
I sense a but in your question.
I'll stop. But
No, don't stop.
no, because then I'm
Don't stop,
thinking. But then all our consciousness are combined, are linked into sort of. Then there would be one big consciousness.
Why not? Exactly. Could it be that there is one big consciousness, one single infinite consciousness, of which each of our minds is a modulation? Why not? In other words, could it be that the self, the essential self of each of us is the same self? And is that not what the experience of love is? The deep recognition that at our core, we are one. Isn't that what you feel when you love someone? That you are one with them? Could it be that love is the recognition of our shared being? That whatever it is that knows your experience is the same consciousness that knows my experience. Your thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions are different from mine. But that doesn't imply that the knowing with which each of us knows our experience is different or separate.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
At what point does consciousness arise? At what point does the whirlpool get made? An egg and a sperm, a blastula, an embryo? Do we know? Could we perceive? Like
You say, at what point does consciousness arise?
Yeah.
Consciousness doesn't arise.
Okay, at what point does the whirlpool?
You see, your question implies that there is something called time, and at a certain moment in time, a body is born or conceived, or in this model, mind begins. So your question is, when does the body appear, or when does mind begin? And the presumption in your question that there is a line of time, and at a certain point along that line, mind begins. Do you have any experience of time outside your mind? In other words, if that's the case, if you have no experience of time outside your mind, how do you know that there is something called time, independent of mind? In other words, how do you know that time is not in the mind, rather than the mind an appearance in time? You don't. When you fall asleep at night, the activity of your mind ceases, time and space cease with it. Could it be that time and space only exist in the mind? After all, that is in line with your experience. The mind doesn't exist at a moment in time. Time is the activity of mind. Let's make this even more experiential. Visualize the past, this vast space just behind the present moment. And try to leave the present moment for a moment and visit that space. Try to actually experience the past. Can you go there?
No.
Have you ever been there?
No.
What about the future? Can you go there?
No.
Have you Could you ever go there? Has anyone here ever actually been to, not, we can all think about an apparent past, or visualize it, but have any of you here actually left the now, the present, and actually experienced something called the past?
When you are in am-ness, or
When you're in,
when you are with a different state of mind in am-ness?
when you're in a different state of mind, whatever state of mind, let's say you're having a near-death experience. Does that near-death experience take place in the present, or does it take place in the past? Let's say you're enjoying one of these marvelous states of bliss. Does it take place in the future, or in the past, or in the present? Have any of you ever had an experience that didn't take place in the present? In other words, have any of you ever experienced something called a past? Well, you're a very cooperative audience, but imagine we were to ask this question of all 7 billion of us, not just those of us interested in spiritual matters or non-duality, but anyone, any of the 7 billion of us, presuming that they understood the question, could anybody legitimately answer yes to the question, have I ever visited the past or the future? Nobody has ever or could ever leave the now and visit the time we call past or future. How do we know there is such a time, such a thing as the past? If we are scrupulously honest, simply honest, and refer only to our direct, current, intimate experience. We have to admit that past, in other words, time, is a theory. It is an abstract theory that does not bear any relation to our experience. So the question, when does the body arise? When does the mind arise? We can't answer that question because it presumes that existence of time independent of the mind that supposedly arises in it.
Thank you.
Somebody once asked Atmananda Krishna Menon, when will I recognize my true nature? And he said, when the when ceases.
I'd like you to talk about the separation of a child from the mother. As a mother, I observe that it seems to be very difficult for my child to go through that. She's 6.
6?
And it's difficult for me also to live it again.
Yes.
As a mother.
Yes.
Please.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm obviously not a mother, but I have a 17-year-old boy, and so of course witnessed very closely his relationship with his mother, and witnessed exactly the same phenomenon you are speaking of. Because remember, under this model, the child is like a little whirlpool that grows out of the whirlpool, made of the same water. So if you look at the whirlpools, they are two distinct. First of all, the mini whirlpool, the child is born out of the first whirlpool, and in time, the little whirlpool gets further and further and further away from its mother. But at whatever distance the two whirlpools are in the river, they are still fundamentally connected because they are still made of the same water, and at the level of the water there is nowhere where there is a division or a separation. And I witnessed this with my son and his mother, that for many years not many months, for many years, they were so closely connected. If he got ill, she got ill. If she got ill, he got ill. If she was in a bad mood, he was in a bad mood. It was as if their whirlpools hadn't fully separated, and indeed they hadn't. It's only under the materialist paradigm, where we consider matter to be the reality of experience, that we think separation happens the moment the umbilical cord is cut. That is so. One day, we will, hopefully, humanity, will look back on our materialist paradigm like we look back on the Dark Ages. It is such a primitive view of experience. So think more of your child as a whirlpool that has emanated from your whirlpool. And although the essential forms of the whirlpool are distinct, in the outer layers of each whirlpool there are still ripples that are joined. And it takes time. In my experience, many years, or in my experience with my child and his mother, it takes many years for those two whirlpools to separate. In fact, they never really separate. But there's a beautiful poem, or it's a part of a poem on friendship by Primo Levi. And he says this: remember the time before the wax hardened, when everyone is like a seal. Each of us bears the imprint of a friend met along the way. In each, the trace of each. Remember the time before the wax hardened, when everyone was like a seal. Each of us bears the imprint of a friend met along the way. In each, the trace of each. So not only the very deep and intimate connection between mothers and daughters, or parents and mothers and children, or parents and children, but when any of us meet, even a meeting such as this, our whirlpools, consider each of our minds like whirlpools in the ocean of consciousness, our whirlpools have touched. And as a result, even at some very peripheral level, our minds have mingled. And we will be forever in touch, and each of us bears the trace of each of us within our own mind. That is true of a casual connection when you meet eyes with a stranger on the street and smile, or of the deeper connection between a mother and a child.
Actually, my question, thank you. My
Sorry,
question,
was I not answering your
no,
question?
you did, but maybe I want to go a bit deeper.
It's okay, but it gave me an opportunity to recite Primo Levi's
No,
poem. Sorry, go on.
Somehow I am aware of that as an adult, but when I see her as a child, how can I help her going through that movement of going away, but still be linked? I mean, I make her feel safe, but it seems to be quite a suffering to...
The love is the medium that connects you. So love is the water. Love is the stuff the river is made of. So it is just as the water connects the two whirlpools, so love is the medium that connects you and your child. You don't have to worry about that. As she grows older, she may well end up on the other side of the world, but still the water of love that connects you will remain intact. Now, as long as you feel that, and you obviously do, you don't have to worry about keeping your daughter close. You can let her go, but let her go appropriately. She's 6. So a 6-year-old, you have to keep her, sorry, is it a girl or a boy? A girl. You have to keep her still quite close. But as anyone who's a parent here knows that you have to let the rein out more, and when she's an infant, you keep her close to your body. She hardly ever leaves your body. But every day you let the line out a little bit, and you let her go, and don't be afraid of letting her go, because if you're afraid of letting her go, children are so sensitive, she will pick up your fear, and you will impregnate her with your fear, and she will fear leaving you. She will fear the world. So what you want to communicate to her through your love, not through your words, through your love, is that the bond between you is eternal, unbreakable, and therefore you don't fear her going. She can go where she wants, when she wants, within reason, when she's younger, of course. So you just let her go within reason. Some children stay very close to home. My son was pull. He just wanted his freedom all the time. So I would let his mother and I, we would have to keep it a little firm, because he would have gone too far. And of course, as a parent, you have to make sure the child doesn't go too far.
I'm aware of the ephemeral world and the comings and goings. I'm aware of the emotions that come and go, and I've become aware of the conditioned mind, and I can witness that, and I can stand back from that. At what point does the two merge? Do you eventually, does the conditioned mind eventually fade away? Or do you just always stand witness?
The conditioned mind fades away when the whirlpool dissolves, and even when it dissolves, traces of the whirlpool still remain, still linger in the broader medium of the river. So don't think there's something wrong with the conditioned mind. My mind is conditioned. I speak in English, not Chinese. And I will always speak in English. I will never speak Chinese. That's a condition. It is a limitation of my mind. My mind is limited. I'm experiencing this tent at the yoga festival. I'm not experiencing my bedroom at home. That is, in other words, my perceptions are limited. My thoughts, I'm thinking about our conversation. I'm not thinking about my next trip to the States. My thoughts are limited. Every thought is limited, conditioned. So the only, in other words, the conditioned mind, there's nothing wrong. I intuit in your question that there's some expectation that the conditioned mind will at some time dissolve, and that it should dissolve. In other words, that there is something wrong with the conditioned mind. There's nothing wrong with the conditioned mind. The conditioned mind is the agency through which consciousness knows itself as the world. The only element of the conditioned mind that does dissolve is that part of the mind that believes, I am a separate mind, I am a separate person, I am a finite consciousness, I am a separate self, or an ego. It is that element of the mind that disappears when the mind recognizes its own essence. Were you here? You were here yesterday. How many people were not here yesterday? Okay, quite a few. All right, I'm not going to retell the King Lear and John Smith metaphor. But for those of you that were here, the only part of John Smith's experience that disappears is the belief and the feeling, I am King Lear. So don't worry about your conditioned mind appearing in whatever unique way it appears in your experience. The only element of the conditioned mind that disappears is the belief, I am separate, I am finite, I am going to die, I was born, I am limited, I am separate from you. In other words, it's the separate self, the separateness, the apparent separation or limitation of the mind. And the belief I am temporary or finite that disappears.
So then it's important just to keep bringing yourself back to that awareness.
Yes,
And that
so,
which is eternal.
so keep taking your mind back to its essence in one of the ways that we've discussed or that you've previously heard me say. What is it that knows or is aware of your experience? Well, this morning we started, I am aware of my thoughts, I am aware of my feelings. Go back again and again to the experience of being aware. The experience of being aware is the essence of the mind. Awareness itself is the essence of the mind. That, when I say the essence of the mind, I mean that element of the mind that never disappears. That element of the mind that remains consistently present throughout all changing experience. So visit, instead of visiting objective experience, your thoughts, images, feelings, sensations and perceptions, make a habit of regularly taking the mind back to its essence, pure consciousness, the experience of being aware. And know yourself essentially as that. Your thoughts are not essential to you. Have any of you ever had a thought that was essential to you? Have any of you ever had a feeling or a sensation that was essential? Have any of you ever had a perception that was essential to you? In other words, that didn't disappear. Whatever is essential to us must remain with us all the time. So if no thought, image, feeling, sensation, perception, activity or relationship is essential to us, then what is essential to us? What are we really essentially? Just the experience of being aware. That is the only element of experience that never leaves us. And therefore it is what we essentially, irreducibly are. That's the most important thing, is to know yourself as that. And to allow your thoughts and feelings and your subsequent activities and relationships to be informed by, and as a result be an expression of, that understanding.
Hi, Rupert. Once we have recognized our true nature and we keep coming back, well, the mind and body keeps not being aligned with it, how important it is to, back to the question about therapy earlier, to do some introspection to figure out what is keeping the body and mind not aligned with the true nature.
Yes, I would suggest that it's not enough just to recognize our essential nature. I would suggest that having recognized our essential nature, we should then make every effort to realign all aspects of our life with that recognition. The way we think, but not just the way we think. More importantly, the way we feel and the way we perceive.
Yeah, so my question was about so what keeps us away from awareness, or what keeps the body and mind not aligned with it?
It's an old habit. Our minds and our bodies have, for decades, been conditioned by our culture to express the belief and the feeling, I am a temporary, finite self, separate from everyone and everything else. Now, like any habit that we rehearse for a long time, and we have been rehearsing this habit for decades, that habit gets very deeply etched into ourself. So that habit doesn't disappear overnight when we recognize our true nature. The habit continues, the old habit continues, although it is no longer being fed by our belief in being a separate person. Nevertheless, the habit continues. And there are ways in which we can cooperate with the realignment of our thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions with this understanding. A conversation such as we're having here is a conversation that both leads us to our true nature, and it also explores and exposes our belief in separation. So it is part of the process of realigning our thoughts. But we don't have time here to go into it. There is a deeper exploration which is in some ways more important than the realignment of our thoughts, which is the realignment of the way we feel the body. And that is if you want to find out more about that, you could go to my YouTube channel and look up under the section Yoga Meditations. There's also on the bookstore a collection of meditations called Transparent Body, Luminous World, which deals that this collection of meditations has nothing to do with self-inquiry, nothing to do with the inward-facing part. They're meditations that all explore this realignment, particularly the realignment of the body, the way we feel the body, but also the way we perceive the world. So yes, that's very important. Otherwise, our recognition of our true nature is not fully lived in all realms of experience.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? It's gone? Okay. Time for one more question.
Hello, Rupert.
Hi.
I wanted to ask if one fully realises their true self in this lifetime, would there be a need for one to come back in a body if they completely merged?
It depends what residues are left over in the mind. In other words, as the whirlpool dissolves at death expands out into the river, as the mind expands, dissolves into consciousness, the residues of the mind remain. And those residues become the basis of a new whirlpool downstream. So it depends on the residues that remain in our mind.
Can those residues be completely eliminated to a certain extent?
Don't think of eliminating residues. That's a slightly kind of militaristic approach. I detect some agenda with these residues. The residues, remember, they're only made out of the water of consciousness. There's no. Do you have a problem with the residues?
No, I can let them dissolve.
Let them dissolve and can cooperate with their dissolution. But once you know yourself as the water, then whatever the shape and form of the residues, it's not a problem. So we no longer have an agenda to eliminate the residues. There is a gradual, loving dissolution of these residues, or vasanas, as they're called in the Vedantic tradition. There is a loving cooperation with their dissolution, but no longer an agenda to get rid of them, let alone eliminate them.
That makes sense, yes. Okay, thank you.
I'm a bit confused about the body itself when you say realigning of the body. Because when I meditate, I haven't got a body.
Yes.
And I am not the body, so there's the importance of looking into the body and I just can ignore it.
Well, we don't want to ignore the body. It's true, when you're meditating just on being aware of being aware, you are not interested in your thoughts, your sensations, etc. But the body is a part of our experience. You are now experiencing a flow of sensations and perceptions, which we conceptualize as the body. And for most people, this flow of sensations, namely sensations called the body, is in a state of tension or contraction as a result of believing and feeling I am a separate, I am a fragment, I am vulnerable, I am in need of something, or I need to defend myself from something. So most people, the body is full of a network of tensions and contractions. And this is the contraction of the separate self at the level of our feelings as opposed to the level of our beliefs. And this network of contractions in the body doesn't disappear overnight on recognizing our true nature. These residues, these tensions in the body remain. And if we want to live our new understanding in all realms of our experience, then there is an exploration of the body that needs to be done. There is a realignment of the way we feel the body. Because it's one thing to understand my body appears in consciousness and is made of consciousness. In other words, my body is spacious, open, transparent, empty, borderless, ageless, weightless. It's one thing to understand that. It's quite another thing to feel it. We don't want just to understand non-duality. We want to feel it and to live it and to express it and to feel that the body and the world are made of consciousness, transparent, luminous. The way I'm expressing this in rational terms, but the Sufis are talking about this when they say everywhere you look is the face of God. That's what they're referring to. The world has lost its limitations, has lost its finiteness, lost its objectness, and all our experience is shining with consciousness, shining with God's infinite being. Do we want just to understand that, or do we want to feel it?
I do feel it.
Okay,
That there is no body. It's not just from the head.
Okay, no,
I do have this experience.
No, that's fine. Then maybe for you that exploration has been done. Maybe you no longer have the feeling of having a solid, dense, limited body. That's fine. In your case, it may be that exploration has been done. You feel that your body is open, spacious, loving, sensitive, transparent, luminous. That's fine.
Not all day.
So my answer to you is I'm speaking in general, not just to you personally. If we feel that, then that is fine. But for those of us that either have recognized our true nature or have had glimpses of our true nature and are becoming more and more established in it, many people recognize, yes, I know that I am open, empty, luminous consciousness. I know that the consciousness in each of us is shared, that we all share our being. I know that, and that knowledge is true of our experience. And yet, many people feel, I often find myself behaving in ways that betray the lingering sense of a separate self, my reactivity in relationships, my sense of lack that occasionally comes over me, that motivates me towards an object or a substance. So in such a case, there is a contradiction between our understanding, which is genuine. It's not just intellectual understanding, it's our genuine understanding, and yet we still feel that there are aspects of our life that are not truly an expression of our understanding. In fact, they are expressions of the old belief in being a separate self, and it is legitimate and inevitable that we want to reconcile this contradiction. In fact, the more deeply we are established in our true nature, the less tolerable it is for us to find ourselves behaving in ways that express the sense of separation. And therefore there is this deep desire in us to align all aspects of our life with this understanding. And that is a legitimate desire. And this realignment of the way we feel the body and perceive the world, I'm not sure that we can ever say it comes to an end. I'm not sure that we can... There is something called the recognition of our true nature. But the realignment of all aspects of our experience with that recognition, I think it goes on forever.